The morning mist hung low over Windsor Castle as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood by the tall windows of their private quarters. Her fingers traced the cold glass while she watched the grounds below come alive with the quiet bustle of staff, preparing for what would be one of the most challenging days in recent royal history. The phone call had come at dawn, carrying news that would shake the very foundations of the monarchy and test the strength of those who served it. William found her there, still in her silk nightgown, her usually perfect hair falling loosely around her shoulders. Without words, he placed his hands gently on her arms, feeling the slight tremor that ran through her body. They had both known this day would come eventually, but knowing and experiencing are two entirely different things. The weight of responsibility that came with their titles had never felt heavier than it did in that moment. The news had spread quickly through the palace corridors. Staff members whispered in hushed tones, their usual cheerful morning greetings replaced by solemn nods and worried glances. The royal household, which typically ran with clockwork precision, seemed to move in slow motion as everyone processed the gravity of the situation. Even the corgis seemed to sense the change in atmosphere, staying closer to their handlers and moving with less of their usual playful energy. Catherine turned away from the window and met William's eyes. In them, she saw the same mix of grief and determination that she felt in her own heart. They had been preparing for this responsibility their entire married life, but no amount of training could fully prepare someone for the reality of leading a nation through sorrow. The British people would look to them for comfort, for stability, and for hope during the dark days that lay ahead. The prince reached for his wife's hand, intertwining their fingers in a gesture that had become second nature over their years together. They stood in silence for a moment, drawing strength from each other before the demands of duty would pull them in different directions. Outside, the morning sun finally broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the castle grounds, and symbolizing the dawn of a new era, as if responding to an unspoken signal. Both William and Catherine straightened their shoulders and moved toward their respective dressing rooms. There were calls to make, arrangements to oversee, and a nation to comfort. The personal grief they felt would have to be set aside, at least for now. As they stepped into their roles as leaders and symbols of continuity for the British people, the palace staff had already begun implementing the carefully rehearsed protocols that had been planned for years. Black-bordered stationery was being prepared, official statements were being drafted, and security measures were being quietly increased. The machinery of the monarchy was moving into action, but at its center were two people trying to balance their human emotions with their public responsibilities. Catherine chose a simple black dress from her wardrobe, one that conveyed both respect and approachability. She had learned over the years that her clothing choices spoke volumes to the public, and today, more than ever, every detail mattered. William selected his military uniform, the weight of the medals and decorations reminding him of the generations of service that had come before him, and the duty that now fell squarely on his shoulders as they prepared to face the world. Both reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From their university days when they were just young people in love, to their wedding day when they promised to support each other through whatever challenges life might bring, to this morning when that promise would be tested in the most public way possible. Their love story had become intertwined with the story of the nation itself. The sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor reminded them that their private moment was coming to an end. Soon they would step outside these walls and into the glare of international attention. Every word they spoke, every gesture they made, would be analyzed and interpreted by millions of people around the world. But for now, in these last few minutes of relative privacy, they were simply William and Catherine, a husband and wife, supporting each other through one of life's most difficult moments. The Great Hall of Buckingham Palace had been transformed overnight into a center of solemn activity. Catherine walked through the ornate corridors, her heels clicking softly against the marble floors as she made her way to the first of many meetings that would consume the day. The weight of tradition seemed to press down from the gilded ceilings and oil paintings of monarchs past, each one a reminder of the continuity she and William were now responsible for maintaining. Private Secretary Sarah Mitchell was waiting with a thick folder of documents that required immediate attention. The efficient woman had served the royal family for over a decade, but even she seemed shaken by the magnitude of the day's events. As Catherine reviewed the schedule, she realized that every minute for the next several days had been carefully planned and choreographed. There would be little time for private grief, little space for the human emotions that threatened to overwhelm her composure. Meanwhile, William was in conference with senior government officials and church leaders. The constitutional implications of the situation required careful navigation, and every decision would be scrutinized by constitutional experts and historians for generations to come. He found himself drawing on years of preparation and education, but also on the wisdom his grandmother had shared with him. During their private conversations about duty and sacrifice, the first public appearance would be crucial. Catherine stood before her full-length mirror, adjusting her pearl necklace and checking that every detail of her appearance conveyed the appropriate message. Her stylist had suggested adding a small brooch that had belonged to her late mother-in-law, a subtle tribute that would not go unnoticed by those who studied royal symbolism. These small gestures carried enormous weight in the language of the monarchy. Outside the palace gates, crowds were already beginning to gather. People had traveled from across the country and around the world, bringing flowers, handwritten notes, and small tokens of respect. The sight of so many people united in their grief and support was both comforting and overwhelming. Television crews from every major network had set up their equipment, preparing to broadcast this historic moment to billions of viewers worldwide. William joined Catherine in the drawing room, where they would make their first joint appearance. The room had been chosen carefully, formal enough to convey the gravity of the situation, but warm enough to seem approachable and human. The lighting had been adjusted to be flattering but not glamorous, and every piece of furniture had been positioned to create the right visual impression for the cameras. As they reviewed their prepared statements one final time, both were acutely aware that their words would be quoted and remembered for decades to come. The speechwriters had worked through the night to craft something that honored the past while looking toward the future, something that acknowledged the nation's grief while providing hope and reassurance. But ultimately, the success of the message would depend on their ability to deliver it with genuine emotion and conviction. The moment arrived with a gentle knock on the door. Their press secretary entered, followed by a small army of advisors, security personnel, and technical staff. The careful choreography of a royal appearance was about to begin, and every person in the room had a specific role to play in ensuring its success. Catherine took a deep breath and felt William's reassuring presence beside her. They walked together through the palace corridors toward the designated room where the cameras waited. The weight of history seemed to follow them with each step, the ghosts of previous generations who had faced their own moments of crisis and challenge. The portraits on the walls seemed to watch their progress, offering silent encouragement from across the centuries as they approached the doorway. Catherine felt a familiar flutter of nerves mixed with determination. She had learned over the years to channel her anxiety into focus, to transform her natural shyness into a warm accessibility that connected with people. William, too, was drawing on years of training and experience, remembering the lessons about leadership and service that had been instilled in him from childhood. The cameras were already rolling as they entered the room, capturing every nuance of their expressions and body language. The bright lights felt warm against their faces, and the familiar presence of the press corps created an atmosphere of controlled tension. This was the moment when their private grief would become public property, when their personal journey would merge completely with their public duty. Standing side by side, they represented not just themselves, but the continuity of an institution that had guided the nation through wars, celebrations, triumphs, and tragedies. The weight of that responsibility was enormous, but so was the strength they drew from each other and from the support of the people they served. The television lights created an almost ethereal glow around Catherine and William as they took their positions behind the mahogany podium. The ornate room, with its deep burgundy walls and crystal chandeliers, provided a backdrop that spoke of permanence and tradition, while the couple themselves embodied the modern face of the monarchy. Catherine's hands were folded carefully in front of her, a gesture that appeared natural but had been practiced countless times to convey both composure and accessibility. William stepped forward first, his voice steady despite the emotion that flickered briefly across his features. The words he spoke had been carefully crafted, but his delivery was entirely his own, measured, sincere, and carrying the weight of genuine feeling. He spoke of duty and service, of the bonds that connected the royal family to the people of Britain and the Commonwealth, and of the continuity that would carry the nation forward through this period of transition. Catherine watched her husband, with a mixture of pride and support, occasionally nodding slightly to acknowledge particularly poignant moments in his address. When her time came to speak, she moved to the microphone with a grace that had become second nature over years of public appearances. Her voice, softer than William's, but no less authoritative, carried a warmth that seemed to reach through the television screens into the homes of millions of viewers. She spoke of family, of loss, and of the strength that comes from unity in times of sorrow. Her words were chosen to comfort not just the nation, but also the many individuals around the world who had been touched by similar losses in their own lives. The personal became universal as she shared thoughts about grief, memory, and the importance of carrying forward the values and traditions that define a community behind the cameras. Palace staff monitored social media feeds and news websites, watching in real time as the couple's words spread across the globe. The initial response was overwhelmingly positive, with commentators praising both the content of their statements and the dignified manner in which they were delivered. International leaders began issuing their own statements of support and condolence, creating a global conversation about leadership, loss, and resilience. The couple took questions from a small group of carefully selected journalists, each query designed to allow them to expand on themes of continuity, service, and hope. Catherine fielded a question about how they planned to support young people through this difficult time. Drawing on her extensive work with children's charities and her understanding of how major events can affect developing minds and emotions, William addressed questions about the constitutional implications of the changes taking place, demonstrating his deep understanding of the complex relationships between the monarchy, parliament, and the people. His responses showed years of preparation and study, but also a genuine commitment to serving in whatever capacity would be most beneficial to the nation. As the formal portion of the appearance concluded, the couple remained in the room for additional footage that would be used in news broadcasts and documentaries for years to come. They reviewed maps showing the locations of memorial services being planned across the country, discussed the logistics of upcoming ceremonial events, and met briefly with representatives from various community organizations who would play important roles in the days ahead. The afternoon brought a series of private meetings with family members, government officials, and religious leaders. Each conversation required a different tone and approach as Catherine and William navigated the complex web of relationships and responsibilities that define royal life. They met with children's advocates to discuss how to help young people process the national mourning period, consulted with historians about precedent and protocol, spoke with security experts about the practical challenges of managing large public gatherings. Through it all, they maintained their public composure while privately supporting each other through moments of fatigue and emotion. Palace staff noted how naturally they worked as a team, with Catherine stepping forward when her particular strengths were needed, and William taking the lead when his experience and training were most relevant. Their partnership had evolved over years of marriage and public service into an efficient and effective collaboration. The evening brought a brief respite as they returned to their private quarters for dinner with their children. The palace dining room was set simply, with family photographs replacing some of the more formal artwork. This was their sanctuary, the place where they could set aside their public roles and simply be parents dealing with a family crisis. The children had questions that required honest but age-appropriate answers, and both William and Catherine drew on their experience as parents to provide comfort and reassurance. Later, as they prepared for bed, they reviewed the day's events and began planning for the challenges that tomorrow would bring. The response to their public appearance had exceeded expectations, but they knew that the real test would come in the days and weeks that followed as they guided the nation through a period of mourning and into a new chapter of its history. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones of Windsor as Catherine and William emerged from their car to walk among the thousands of people who had gathered to pay their respects. The scene was unlike anything they had experienced. Before an ocean of flowers, handwritten cards, photographs, and personal mementos stretched as far as the eye could see. The air was filled with the scent of roses and lilies, mixed with the quiet murmur of conversations and the occasional sound of someone overcome with emotion. Catherine moved slowly through the crowd, stopping frequently to speak with individuals who had traveled great distances to be there. An elderly woman from Scotland pressed a small tartan pouch into her hands, explaining that it had belonged to her own grandmother and represented a lifetime of respect for the royal family. A young mother lifted her toddler so the child could hand Catherine a drawing made with crayons and construction paper. The simple artwork somehow more meaningful than the most elaborate floral arrangements. William found himself in conversation with a group of veterans who had served in various conflicts over the decades. Their weathered faces told stories of sacrifice and service that resonated deeply with his own understanding of duty. One man, using a walking stick and wearing his medals with obvious pride, shared memories of meeting previous generations of royals during his military service. The continuity of these connections across time seemed to provide comfort to everyone involved. The crowd was remarkably diverse, representing every age group, economic background, and cultural community in Britain. Families had driven through the night to be present, students had skipped classes, and workers had taken time off from their jobs. The shared experience of grief and respect had created an atmosphere of unity that transcended the usual divisions that sometimes characterize modern society. Catherine paused beside a makeshift memorial where someone had arranged dozens of photographs. Spanning several decades of royal history, the images told the story of a family that had shared both joy and sorrow with the nation, creating bonds that went far beyond the formal relationships defined by constitutional law. She studied the faces in the photographs, remembering personal moments that had occurred away from public view, but that had shaped the people they had all become. A group of schoolchildren, carefully supervised by their teachers, had prepared a special presentation. They sang traditional songs and recited poems they had written themselves, their young voices carrying a purity of emotion that brought tears to the eyes of many adult observers. Catherine knelt down to their level, speaking with each child individually and accepting their handmade gifts with the same grace. She showed two visiting dignitaries. William was drawn to a section where military personnel had created their own tribute area. It's a precision and respect with which they had arranged their offerings spoke to the deep connection between the royal family and the armed forces. He spent considerable time speaking with serving members and veterans, listening to their stories and sharing his own experiences of military training and service. The couple worked their way through different sections of the gathering area, reflecting the unique character of the communities that had organized them. Representatives from Commonwealth nations had created displays featuring flags and traditional items from their home countries, emphasizing the global nature of the relationships they were there to honor. Religious leaders from various faiths had established quiet spaces for reflection and prayer, welcoming people of all beliefs to participate in their own way. As the afternoon progressed, Catherine and William found themselves becoming part of an organic, unscripted ceremony that was being created by the collective actions of thousands of individuals. People began singing hymns and traditional songs, their voices joining together in harmonies that seemed to rise spontaneously from the crowd. The formal protocols and planned events seemed less important than this authentic expression of community sentiment. The emotional impact of the day was evident in small moments that the cameras might miss, but that would remain forever in the memories of those who experienced them. An elderly couple who had been married for 60 years shared their own story of enduring love and commitment. A young artist presented a portrait she had painted from memory, capturing not just physical likeness, but something deeper about character and spirit. Local businesses and organizations had set up stations providing free refreshments and services to the crowds, transforming what could have been a logistical nightmare into a demonstration of community cooperation. Volunteers helped direct traffic, provided information, and offered assistance to anyone who needed it. The entire town seemed to have mobilized to support both the visitors and the solemn purpose that had brought them together. As evening approached, Catherine and William reluctantly began to make their way back toward their car. The crowd seemed to understand that their time was limited, but no one appeared eager to leave. Many people remained in place, continuing conversations that had begun hours earlier and maintaining the sense of connection that had developed throughout the day. The couple promised to return, knowing that this experience had changed them in ways they were only beginning to understand. The private chapel at Windsor Castle had never felt more sacred than it did in the early hours before dawn. When Catherine found herself alone with her thoughts and prayers, the stained glass windows, usually brilliant with colored light, appeared as dark silhouettes against the pre-dawn sky. She had slipped away from the royal apartments while William was still sleeping, needing these moments of solitude to process the emotional weight of the past few days. The wooden pews, worn smooth by generations of royal worshippers, provided a sense of continuity that was both comforting and humbling. Catherine thought about all the other women who had sat in this same place during their own times of crisis and challenge, queens, princesses, and duchesses who had faced wars, personal losses, and moments when the future of the monarchy itself seemed uncertain. Their strength seemed to whisper encouragement from the shadows. When William found her there an hour later, he slid quietly into the pew beside her without breaking the peaceful silence. They had learned over years of marriage to communicate without words when necessary, and this was one of those moments when presence mattered more than conversation. His hand found hers, and they sat together watching as the first rays of sunlight began to illuminate the ancient glass, transforming the chapel into a kaleidoscope of gentle colors. The day's schedule would be less public than the previous ones, but no less demanding. They had requested time to visit with palace staff members who had served for decades, who were experiencing their own grief during this transition. These were the people who worked behind the scenes to maintain the daily operations of the monarchy: gardeners, housekeepers, security personnel, and administrative staff who had developed personal relationships with the royal family over years of faithful service in the staff dining hall. Catherine and William sat with employees who ranged from recent hires to those who had served for 40 years or more. The conversations were informal and deeply personal as longtime staff members shared memories and expressed their own concerns about the changes taking place. A head gardener spoke about the special flowers that had been cultivated for decades, each variety chosen for its symbolic significance and personal meaning. The head cook reminisced about favorite meals and special occasions, the small details that had created a sense of family within the formal structure of royal life. William found himself particularly drawn to conversations with the security team, men and women who had dedicated their careers to protecting the royal family, often at great personal sacrifice. Their professionalism never wavered, but their genuine affection for the people they protected was evident in every interaction. These relationships, built on trust and mutual respect, would be crucial in the challenging times ahead. The afternoon brought a private meeting with representatives from various charitable organizations that had been supported by the royal family for generations. Catherine had always been passionate about her patronages. The current situation added new urgency. Two discussions about how to maintain and expand support for causes that desperately needed attention. The room was filled with people who had devoted their lives to helping others: social workers, educators, healthcare professionals, and advocates for vulnerable populations. Each organization presented updates on their current projects and future needs. But the conversation quickly evolved into something deeper. These were people who understood crisis and loss from their daily work with struggling communities. Their perspective on grief, resilience, recovery provided valuable insights that went far beyond the immediate challenges facing the royal family. A particularly moving moment came when the director of a children's hospice spoke about how young patients had been following the royal family's journey through recent events. The children, despite facing their own serious challenges, had created artwork and written letters expressing their support and understanding. Their innocence and wisdom offered a unique perspective on what it means to face Difficult circumstances with grace and courage, Catherine was deeply affected by stories of how royal visits and support impacted individual lives over the years. A woman who ran a program for survivors of domestic violence explained how a single visit from the princess had transformed not just her organization's profile and funding, it had given hope to countless women who felt forgotten by society. These personal testimonies reinforced the real-world impact of royal patronage. Beyond the formal ceremonies and public appearances, the evening was reserved for family time. With a quiet dinner that included extended family members who had traveled to Windsor to offer their support, the conversation around the table was a mixture of practical planning and personal reflection, as relatives shared their own memories and offered their perspectives on the path forward. The children, while not fully understanding all the implications of recent events, seemed to sense the importance of family unity during difficult times. Later, as Catherine and William walked through the castle grounds in the gathering dusk, they discussed the profound responsibility they felt, not just to the nation and Commonwealth, but to all the individuals whose lives had been touched by their service. The conversations of the day had reminded them that their roles extended far beyond ceremonial functions. They were part of a living institution that had the power to bring comfort, inspire hope, and create positive change in countless lives. The stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky as they made their way back to their private quarters. Carrying with them the weight of all they had heard and experienced, tomorrow would bring new challenges and responsibilities. But tonight they had gained a deeper understanding of the true meaning of service and the quiet strength that comes from connecting with others in times of shared sorrow and hope. 3 months later, Catherine stood once again at the windows of Windsor Castle. But the view that greeted her was transformed. The grounds that had been covered with flowers and memorials were now returning to their usual pristine condition, though a permanent memorial garden had been established in one corner, ensuring that the outpouring of public affection would not be forgotten. The early morning mist was lifting to reveal a landscape touched by the first hints of spring, symbolizing renewal and hope after a period of national mourning. William joined her with 2 cups of tea, a simple domestic gesture that had become even more precious during the intense months of public service they had just navigated. They had learned to treasure these quiet moments together, understanding now more than ever how rare and valuable privacy could be for people in their position. The steam from their cups created small clouds in the cool morning air as they stood together, temporarily free from the demands of duty and protocol, the transformation in their own relationship had been as profound as the changes in their public roles. The crisis had tested their partnership in ways they could never have imagined, but it had also strengthened their bond and clarified their shared sense of purpose. They had discovered reserves of strength and resilience they didn't know they possessed, and had learned to support each other through the most challenging moments of their lives. Their children had adapted to the changes with the remarkable flexibility that young people often display during times of upheaval. The family had made a conscious decision to maintain as much normalcy as possible in their private lives, understanding that stability at home would be essential for managing the increased demands of their public responsibilities. School routines, bedtime stories, and family game nights had provided anchors during the storm of public attention and constitutional change. The morning schedule included their first major joint public appearance since the period of formal mourning had ended. They would be visiting a new community center in Manchester, officially opening the facility, while also demonstrating the continuity of royal patronage and support for local initiatives. The visit had been planned carefully to strike the right balance between honoring the past and embracing the future. Catherine had chosen her outfit with particular care, selecting colors and styles that conveyed optimism while remaining appropriately respectful of recent events. Her approach to royal fashion had evolved significantly over the years, and she now understood how to use clothing as a form of communication that could reinforce the messages she wanted to convey through her words and actions. William was reviewing briefing materials about the community center and the local organizations they would be meeting, but his preparation went beyond simple facts and figures. He had developed a deeper appreciation for the impact that royal attention could have on grassroots organizations, and had become more intentional about using these opportunities to highlight important social issues. The drive to Manchester provided an opportunity to discuss their strategy for the visit and their broader approach to royal duties in this new phase of their lives. They had both become more confident in their ability to adapt traditional royal protocols to meet contemporary needs while maintaining the dignity and effectiveness that made the monarchy relevant to modern British society. The community center was buzzing with activity when they arrived. It's filled with local residents, volunteers, and officials who had worked for years to make the facility a reality. The building itself was impressive, modern, and welcoming while incorporating design elements that reflected the area's industrial heritage. Children's artwork decorated the walls, and the sounds of various activities could be heard from different rooms throughout the building. Catherine was immediately drawn to the children's programs, spending time in the nursery and after-school care areas where she could interact naturally with young people and their caregivers. Her genuine interest in child development and family support shone through as she asked detailed questions about the services being provided and listened carefully to stories about how the center was already making a difference in people's lives. William focused his attention on the community programs designed to support adult learning and job training. He spoke with individuals who were developing new skills, changing careers, or working to overcome various challenges in their lives. The conversations reinforced his understanding of how royal patronage could help highlight successful programs that might serve as models for other communities. The formal opening ceremony was brief but meaningful, with local children presenting flowers and community leaders expressing their gratitude for the royal visit. Catherine and William each spoke about the importance of community facilities like this one, emphasizing how such centers could bring people together and provide opportunities for growth and connection across different age groups and backgrounds. As the day concluded and they prepared to return to Windsor, both Catherine and William reflected on how much their understanding of their roles had deepened over the past few months. The crisis they had navigated together had not just been about managing grief and constitutional change. It had been about discovering their own capacity for leadership and service in circumstances they could never have fully prepared for. The evening light was soft and golden as their car wound through the countryside toward home. They had faced their greatest test as a royal couple and had emerged stronger, more confident, and more committed to their shared mission of serving the British people with grace, dignity, and genuine care. The challenges ahead would be different from those they had just overcome, but they now knew they possessed the strength and partnership necessary to meet whatever the future might bring. Back at Windsor, they would spend the evening with their children, helping with homework, sharing stories about their day, and maintaining the family routines that kept them grounded in their most important roles as parents. Tomorrow would bring new responsibilities and opportunities, but tonight they could rest in the knowledge that they had successfully guided the nation through a difficult transition while staying true to their own values and their commitment to each other.